Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fresh Take from What Fresh Hell Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. This is Margaret.
And this is Amy. Today we're talking to Dr. Jean M. Twenge. She is a professor of psychology at San Diego State University. She's the mother of 3 daughters and the author of more than 190 scientific publications and several books based on her research, including Generations, iGen, Generation Me, and her latest book, which we will be discussing today, 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World, How Parents Can Stop Smartphones, Social Media, and Gaming from Taking Over Their Children's Lives. Welcome, Jean.
Thanks so much.
Sounds like something we want to talk about
Right.
and our audience wants to hear about.
That's right. I wanted to go back all the way to 2017, which is when, at least for me, your work, when I first became aware of your work, it went viral. You studied generational differences. And so anyway, tell us about the revelation that you had in 2017 and then what happened when you wrote about it.
Yeah, it was actually a couple years before that because, this is my job to analyze generational differences. So I keep an eye on the big national surveys of teens. And there's, like a 2-year delay in the data coming out. So with the data from 2012 and then 2013, I started to see these patterns that there was these sudden increases in teens saying that they were lonely, that they felt left out, that they felt like they couldn't do anything right, that their life wasn't useful. And those 2 are classic symptoms of depression. And then over those years, more and more it came out, well, actually clinical level depression is going up. And that, of course, begged the question of why. And it was completely misaligned with economic cycles. It was tough to think of anything else that happened around 2012 that, might be one big event that kept going in the same direction, that had a big effect on teens' day-to-day lives. And then I realized when I was reading a poll one day, well, the end of 2012 was the first time that the majority of Americans owned smartphones. And I also knew from, the survey data I've been working with, that's also when social media use became really common among teens. So then it kind of fell into place because teens were spending a lot more time on social media and with their phones and online. And elsewhere in these surveys also figured out they're spending less time sleeping and less time with their friends face to face in person. And you put those 3 together, that is a pretty poor formula for mental health. And it's something that affected them, teens, every day, and almost all teens around the country. So it made sense that that might be why depression and loneliness are going up.
So you wrote about it, and
Mhm.
I mean, I remember reading it. Everybody read it. It was one of those articles everybody sent to everybody. It was in the Atlantic. And at the time, some people dismissed it as alarmist or couldn't be the only explanation or correlation does not equal causation, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like people aren't really saying that now, that 8 years later, everybody's sort of like, it probably is the phones.
Yeah. And there's still a few people who want to deny it because that's just how things work. But pretty much everybody who has teen kids has seen this and has seen the effects of these technologies, which, smartphones are not all bad. It's just if you're on it for 10 hours a day, then you start to see some negative consequences. And that's what we have definitely seen.
And I feel like just in looking around my own house, and I'm pointing at me as much as my teens, that the default of phone use is so pervasive that I find I had cousins over and I had a whole house full of kids and everybody's having fun. And then at a certain point, the phones just come out. We had a, dinner for a bunch of kids and by the end, everybody's staring at their phones. It's just kind of this pull that pulls kids back into it.
Yeah,
Even
and
though they're in a
once,
yard with like plenty of things to
right,
do and we could throw the ball around and we could this, but by the end,
yeah,
I've got 30 kids and they're all looking at, and they are, I will say, to some degree interacting because they're showing each other what they're looking at, but it's not the same as throwing a baseball around.
yeah, and it's become the default. And have you ever noticed that once one person takes out the phone, then the other does, and it's this snowball effect.
Yes.
So, and that was the other thing that got me thinking with the effect on teens is, probably the worst part of it is that they're alone in their rooms on a screen a lot more. But also, just as you're describing, that even when they are together in person, the phone interferes with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many rooms of teens I've walked into, and it's 6 of them sitting in a circle, but everybody's on their phone. They're kind of together, not together in this funny way.
Yeah.
You before said something about you spend 10 hours a day on your phone, and probably some people listening are like, well, that's just some funny exaggeration, right? That's hyperbole. But I couldn't believe some of the numbers you cited in this book that kids are spending 6, 7, 8 hours a day. As you said, it's a full-time job on their phones. And how does that play out in the generational differences that you study? It makes us less happy, but how else does it play out?
hmm Well, I think it's definitely behind the increase in sleep deprivation among teens that we see in these surveys, because it's just too tempting to be on the phone late at night, to look at it right before you go to bed and then not sleep well, to look at it in the middle of the night and not sleep then. So that was one of the statistics that probably stunned me the most, was the Common Sense Media study finding that the majority of 11 to 17-year-olds have been, when they tracked their phones, so not even self-report, that they had used their phones between midnight and 5 a.m. on school nights. I'm going to go see if I can put my hands real quick on the exact statistic. It's at the beginning of the chapter on sleep. Yeah, 6 out of 10.
6 out
That's
of
what they
10
found.
teens report using their phone in the middle of the night.
Yep, on school nights. We're not even talking weekends. 11 to 17-year-olds, and they track them midnight to 5 a.m. on school nights. 6 out of 10. Isn't that crazy?
That
It's
is
crazy and
crazy.
not a surprise. Yeah. So I guess that kind of takes us to the 10 rules. They're in the book. And the rule, let's start with the rule that you say is like the non-negotiable. People's like, I can't take 10 rules. Give me one rule. What's the one rule that you suggest that parents start with?
No electronic devices in the bedroom overnight. So after lights out, preferably within a half hour or so of bedtime, but to get the phone out of the bedroom at night. And that's for all ages. It's not just for your kids. If
Right.
you can do that as a parent, you'll sleep better too. So just, there's a bunch of studies showing even having the phone there, even if you don't look at it, even if it's off, the physical presence of the phone, you don't sleep as well.
Yeah, we just are starting a school year where they've instituted a cell phone ban in New York.
Yay.
And I
Rule
agree.
10. Rule
I
10
have
is
to
Yes,
to
say,
that's right.
advocate for
That's right.
smartphone bans. That's right.
we're
Yes.
not hearing yay from our children, but we are saying yay as the parents. And I do think we talk about this in a lot of areas, that spaces and places make discipline easier. That, like, we don't
Yes.
ever use our phone in the car. We never use our phone at the dinner table. Like, that the more spaces and places that you can have, because what I find, and I have 3 teenagers now, that the kind of constant, I'm the jack in the box, turn off your phone, turn off your phone, turn off your phone,
Right.
turn off your phone,
Yep.
that it's much easier to say, no phones in the car, no phones at the
Yep.
table, no
Yep.
phones in your bedroom
Then you
overnight.
say it once, you have one rule instead of, having to negotiate it every 5 minutes.
That's right. And
Yep.
I see, and my kids are outraged by this rule. And I've been trying to explain it to them from the school's point of view, that they don't want to be fighting this all day.
Mm-hmm.
And that the distraction of knowing it's in your bag and buzzing, you could hear it buzzing.
Yes,
You're
exactly.
now out of the lesson. You're
Yep.
wondering, even if you're
Yep.
not picking up the phone, like, was it my mom? Was it the girl I have a crush on? Like,
Right.
who was that buzz from? It's so
Exactly.
much more exciting than my history lesson right
Mm-hmm.
now. And I really see a change. I mean, we've only been back to school for a month, and I've already seen a huge change. I will say, I think it makes it a little harder for the parents at home,
Mm.
because it's like, oh my gosh, I've gotten my precious back at 3
Right.
o'clock.
Right.
And I do feel it's an increased amount of pressure on me then to fight back against the phone in the after school hours.
Yeah. So what difference have you noticed?
I think that I don't see it so much at school because I'm not with them. But from what I hear from my teacher friends, the fraughtness of it is just so much easier. The kids are complaining about it. But because it's a rule, Amy has a thing she says all the time. Well, the lady says it's time to leave the park, when the alarm goes off.
Right. The
Love
duck
it.
quacks is
Somehow
going to leave. Right.
we've
Love it.
put this on a third party. And
Yes.
so, well, the governor won't let us do it. No matter how much we'd love you to
Yeah.
have our phones,
That's
the
great.
dumb government is not letting it. But it feels like it's taken a lot of the pressure off of the teachers. And at back to school night, they were telling us that they see the kids much more engaged with each other and talking to
Yes.
each other during
Yes.
breaks, because the
Yes.
problem was that using phones basically between classes. They were grabbing their phones out, and in
Right.
the 3
Of
minutes,
course.
every single kid in the hallway is
Yep.
looking at it.
Yep.
And that they're seeing much more, that people are having conversations and might even be discussing, like, did you know that thing about history that we were just learning about? And that's a huge positive that I wouldn't have even thought about.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it has to be bell to bell. Same thing for lunch, that then they're talking to each other face to face at lunch
Yeah.
instead of being on their phones. So, and I think the teenagers, yeah, they're going to complain, but they're going to get used to it. So where it's going to be easier is the kids in like fifth grade, sixth grade, where they're just not going to know any other way. So it's probably, I'm sure it's hardest for the 12th graders and the 11th graders, if I had
Yeah.
to guess.
My kids have had it. It's a second year for them. Actually, I have two high school graduates, so it's been in place for a couple years at their high school. Second year for my daughter, and I haven't heard as much complaining. And I thought one of the most interesting things that you talk about in the book is that my daughter's reaction was sort of like, I know, we got to get rid of them. It's
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah.
And you quote a study where kids are asked agree or leave. It was agree or disagree with different statements. And it was like, I wish Instagram never existed or didn't exist. And a shockingly high amount of teenagers said, yes, I wish it
I think
didn't
that
exist.
may have actually even been young adults
Young
instead of
adults,
teenagers, but
or like
same
Snapstreak,
principle.
right? Would you rather there
So
not be
that's right.
Snapstreak? Kids are like, yes.
That one is teens, even middle school students. Yeah. So I heard that a while ago from someone who gave talks at middle schools a lot. He was associated with the Center for Humane Technology, which is run by Tristan Harris. And he said, yeah, I go to middle schools all the time. I say, how many of you have Snapstreaks? And almost everybody raises their hand. How many of you really like Snapstreaks? And all the hands would go down. It's an addict's narrative.
So do you find it more alarming or more encouraging that the kids, even if in the beginning they're like grumble about the cell phones, very quickly they're like, oh no, thank God, because it's a terrible thing that I can't put down. The kids own that. Is that even more reason to be alarmed?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's encouraging because think about what they're up against that many adults can't even get around, which is just how the social media companies, for example, put billions of dollars into making sure people spend as much time as possible and come back to the app as often as possible. Those algorithms are really, really powerful. They get adults, and they get children and teens even more. And yeah, that phone is just very compelling. And it's, there's a lot of behavioral psychology in there too, of like the Pavlovian response when it buzzes or dings, the, reward of that dopamine hit. But then you come down from it. Early on, like in 2017, 2018, when I first started giving talks at high schools about this, at first I was really scared. I really thought the kids were going to hate me and that I was going to be, old lady, what are you talking about? You don't know. Some of the things my own kids sometimes say to me now, they didn't say that. They didn't say that. I certainly got pushback from time to time, which I welcome. Like, great, let's talk about that. But most of the time it was, we know, but we don't know how to change it.
And that's what this book is for. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, can we talk more about the algorithms and why they're such a problem? So, Jean, you talk in the book so compellingly about how, the algorithms, we all know, like algorithm, it means you can't put your phone down, right? But what you talk about in the book is how the algorithm drives an adolescent user into a rabbit hole. Like, my Instagram is not my daughter's Instagram, is not my son's Instagram. They're completely different. So when we say TikTok seems fine, it's we don't know what our kids are being directed and sent down. So can you give us some examples of how that plays out?
Yeah, so what the algorithm does is it shows you more of what it thinks you want to see, because that will keep you on the app longer. So TikTok is a great example. It's known for having a very, very sticky and effective algorithm. And the thing it does is if you watch something for a little longer, or you just even linger on it for a little longer, and Instagram Reels does the same thing, you linger on it for a little bit longer, it will show you more of that. So for, a 45-year-old mom, that might end up being cooking videos or maybe workout videos. But for a teenager, what are they going to do? They're going to look a little bit longer at something that's disturbing, something that's inappropriate, something that's violent, that attracts their attention. And all humans do that, but especially teenagers. Or it'll pick up on the mood that they're on, and everyone knows how teenagers' moods go up and down within the
Big
course
swings.
of seconds sometimes. And if they're in a bad mood, then it will pull them toward that negative, depressive content. Sometimes, other people talking about their depression or self-harm or suicidal thoughts. And then that's what they see, because that's how their algorithm works. So yeah, they can end up down these very deep, dark rabbit holes in a way that a relatively mentally healthy adult is not going to see or experience.
And I think I see this with myself and my kids, that it begins to feel like the world is represented on your algorithm, but it is really a bubble that's represented
Yes.
on your algorithm. So I'm trying to think of an example of something. For some reason, I must have been holding my phone and something from India was playing on my phone. And I guess I let it play for too long. And then for a while, everything on my phone was from India. I was
Yeah.
like, I don't understand this language. I don't know what's going on. But it really just showed me that thing of I accidentally strayed too long on here. And now the world is India in my phone, which is kind of a silly example. But I think that if you're looking at content that's like, I'm struggling with depression, that then the world seems like
World is
we're
depression planet.
all dark all the time. And I mean, this is also we're very fractured now politically. And we were noticing the other day, my sisters and I were noticing, we flew to Atlanta for a family wedding. And we're like, look at all these people out here getting along with each other. Like, we were in 2 airports and 2 different cities, and she had come from LA. And I'm like, everywhere I look, people are smiling at each other and getting along. But on my phone, it feels
Mm-hmm.
like we are on the brink of war, where like a neighbor is about to turn on neighbor. And I'm really struck by that thing that I think we don't
Yes.
always calculate, which is
Yes.
our kids start to see the world reflected in their phones. I didn't see that danger coming. I thought, well, you want to keep them away from scary content.
Yeah, it's sure scary content, but it's much more than that. And so that what you're observing there is right on, because the algorithm also tends to pull for things that make people upset or angry because it gets shared more. So then it's more what they call engagement. So social psychology studies have looked at this for several years and found that consistently anything that makes people angry and upset gets pushed more and gets shared more. You're going to see more of that. You're going to see more of people fighting, more of people disagreeing, more content that will make you upset or angry, because that keeps people on the app. And it's a complete funhouse mirror. It distorts all of these things that, yes, you go to an airport or any other place in the real world, and it's not like that. And people are, for the most part, getting along.
It makes me think of Charlie Kirk's death and the reaction to it, right? There were definitely some people in my life who were like, I'm sorry, who is this? Right. And then my young adolescents couldn't believe that these older people weren't, supremely aware of every word this person had ever said. And they were just
Right.
both like, what do you mean this person's famous? What do you
Right.
mean you've never heard of this person? And it just showed how algorithmically different we all are.
Yeah. Fame is atomized. There's a few exceptions to that. Compared to my Gen X childhood, when fame meant, you were in a TV show or a movie. Now, my kids talk about this person and that person who, they saw on YouTube, and I have no idea who it is.
But everybody has the same size microphone, which is another challenge because
Yes,
Blue 264 told me that
exactly.
actually, and I'm like, that is a guy. Who the heck knows who that
In
guy
his mother's
is?
basement, right? Yeah,
Right. Like if a
so
guy walked up to you at the mall and was like, by the way, stop taking vaccines, you'd be like, wait, what? You're
yeah,
crazy. Back away from me.
right.
But online, people feel like, well, they must have expert because they must be an expert because they have a lot of followers.
Right. And no, it's because they have provocative content.
Intense.
Doesn't matter that it's wrong. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, look, there's absolute upsides to our system where that, yes, anybody can have a microphone, but there's huge, huge downsides. And that's one of the biggest ones is misinformation. And also that political polarization, because yeah, the average person online is going to be much more polarizing than the average person you meet in person, because polarization, extreme viewpoints, extreme content gets likes and followers.
Let me ask you about kids who struggle socially, who find gaming and online friends much easier to access because I have a kid like that, and it's a little bit more of a dilemma than my maybe more neurotypical kids for whom it's like, okay, just get offline. I think kids on the spectrum or kids with different neurodiverse issues sometimes find online relationships easier, whether it's lack of eye contact. I don't know exactly why, but what about that situation in terms of is it always equally bad, or for some kids is it like, well, this kid kind of needs it actually?
Yeah. Well, it makes me wonder, what did kids on the spectrum do when those resources weren't available,
Yeah.
right? And did they were they more or less, if they wanted social interaction, they had to pick up the phone or talk to people in person, and did that change them? I don't know. So you could make that argument. I wouldn't go that far of saying, okay, sorry, kid, because yeah, I totally get when kids are in that situation. I would say it's more of like a compromise position of, gaming, if that's in real time with your friends, is a lot less obviously toxic than social media,
Mm,
but it can't be 8 hours a day.
yeah.
There has to be a limit on it. So I think that
Right.
still applies for sure. But to favor things that are in real time and with friends makes a lot of
Mm,
sense.
that makes a lot of sense.
It seems to me, so one of your rules is about parental controls, that they exist and we need to be using them. So what would be some parental controls for a kid who does a lot of gaming, right? That would be useful, I suppose. Are there ways to just turn it off after a certain amount of time, or what would
Yeah.
what would you suggest that parent do?
Yeah. So it should for sure shut down within about like a half hour before their bedtime. So then it's not going to interfere with sleep, and they have time to wind down before they go to sleep, because games are very, very engaging and they are revving up the brain. Now, that's right before sleep, then that's not good. You need to be settling down for sleep. That would be an absolute rule. And then beyond that, it would be some kind of reasonable time limit. And exactly what that is I've heard families, deal with that in a number of ways. There are some say, none on the weekdays, but as much as you want on the weekends. I would go a little bit more moderate, like maybe an hour a day on the weekdays and maybe 2 or 3 on the weekends tops. So then they are getting that interaction, but it's not taking over their lives completely, because social interaction is all well and good. And gaming, can fulfill that, especially for kids on the spectrum. But a lot of kids on the spectrum have other gifts, and if they don't have the time to develop that, like read extensively in an area they're interested in, or write or play music, or whatever their gift is, then they're that's all they're doing on the weekends is gaming. They're not going to develop those gifts.
Yeah, and we've talked before that technology, it's kind of like water in like opening door in a submarine. Like it just seeps in all the time. Like, okay, I'm keeping you from this. I've got my parental controls. I've got this and that. But now they've given you iPads at school. So now you're
Hmm.
on an iPad working or watching
I
TikToks. Like
know.
I
Do
don't
not
really
get me started on the
it's so
school laptops and
frustrating.
iPads. I know.
Because I have kids now who are teenagers. They go up to their rooms. I assume they're working on homework, but
You
even if
don't
I'm like,
know.
your
This is my
phone is
life.
in my
Mhm.
phone, their
Uh,
phone is in my hand, but I just it's very all it's in the groundwater, I guess is what I'm saying. Like then they're upstairs on their computer, but oh wait a minute, I just figured out you can play Minecraft on the school computer. I don't know
uh-huh.
Mhm.
what the heck
I
they're doing.
I know. And it has YouTube on it too, right?
That's right, YouTube,
Yep.
huge.
Drives me
And YouTube
crazy.
Shorts is basically TikTok, right? I mean, in
Yes,
the beginning, I always
exactly.
say, I was like, we're banning TikTok. I'm a tough mom. We're banning it. And then I realized, oh, TikTok is just YouTube Shorts, or
Huh?
it comes in from so many different directions that I thought I was being so on top of it by banning that. But my kids are still watching a million stupid short videos about stuff that I'm sure is vaguely inappropriate.
So what do you suggest, Jean, that parents do about that? Is it talking to the schools and saying, can we get some homework not on laptop? I mean, what
Yeah,
would you do in such a
yeah,
situation to try to
yeah.
hold some of it back?
Yeah. So that's part of it is, yeah, trying to have that conversation with the school, like, hey, my kid's really distracted and they're not getting their work done and they're on YouTube Shorts. My youngest is still in middle school and they got rid of YouTube Shorts on the school laptops.
Mm.
Finally, they still have YouTube, but they don't have YouTube Shorts. So like tiny progress.
Yeah, but it is actual progress in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. I mean, so that's good. And then I also, and this is not a perfect solution. It depends on how it works in a particular school district. But if they can use a personal laptop instead of the school laptop to do that homework, it's usually by high school they can.
Hmm.
Then you can put parental controls on it. Then you can put a time limit on YouTube. Usually you can't ban it completely because they often need to watch a YouTube video for homework, which I get. But why can't they just incorporate that into Canvas? So this is the other type of conversation that
Yeah,
you
yeah,
could try
right.
to have, with the folks at school. Can you have that video like play in Canvas or be downloaded or just not on YouTube? Because I don't know, I teach college students. I use YouTube in my teaching. I get how it can be educational. I get how it can be useful, but then if they watch that video and then they're watching the next video and the next video, then they're not doing their homework.
I
Yeah,
think,
and it is really a rabbit hole. I mean, I find myself sometimes checking Facebook usually for work stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and then suddenly I'm watching like AI shorts of
I
like the
know.
royals dancing. I'm like, "What? How has this happened to me?" Like,
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
interested in this,
yeah.
but
And
I
you're an
have
adult.
somehow spent a half an hour
Yep,
watching
hmm,
that's
stupid
right.
AI videos, and then I'm
Exactly.
reading the comments to be like, "Do these people not realize this is AI?" I don't
Yeah,
know. It
I know.
really sucks
Exactly.
you in.
It does. That's what it's designed to do. It
Yeah.
is designed to do that. And it's very effective at doing that, even for adults. And then imagine being 12.
right. And it's kind of infuriating that really the only
Yes,
we know this, the social media platforms know this, and the fix is, well, parents just tell them to put their phones down, right? That seems completely unfair
I
to
know.
me
It
and,
is. It is
and
100%
ridiculous.
unfair. It
Yeah.
is. It's absolutely ridiculous. Parents are in an often impossible position. And obviously I think parents can do some things. I wrote the book to try to make it easier for parents, but we need more regulation, and we need schools to think a little bit more deeply about the ed tech, which doesn't seem to have had the results that they were hoping for.
Yeah, it's one of the many problems that we've discussed, including family leave or all sorts of other policies where it this tip of the spear comes at mom like, well, you should
Right.
just figure it out. It's like
I know.
there's a gigantic system
I know. It's
designed
infuriating.
to make this hard, but I think it's worthwhile to put it in front of people and especially mothers all the time. This isn't happening because you're a bad parent. This is happening because
Yes,
multi-billion-dollar corporations are making this as hard as humanly possible. It's not because
exactly.
you stink as a mom.
Exactly. We have to give parents grace, absolutely, and acknowledge how hard it is. I found it hard too with my three teenagers, and yeah, I mean that I talk about that a lot in the book of like, look, this is a really hard job.
It's
It's
hard
it's
for a
not going to be
reason.
easy. Yeah, exactly. That I'm really hoping that we'll get more regulation in this area. Like Australia did that. They raised the minimum age for social media to 16, and they're going to verify age. That's supposed to go into effect in December. So it we'll see how that goes. I'm hoping it goes well. I'm hoping other countries will follow.
Jean, can we talk about that? That was the rule that I thought in your book, like, okay, this is the most challenging and probably the most important, perhaps, that that we shouldn't allow our kids to have social media accounts until they're 16
Or later.
or later. Now Meta or other platforms set it at 13. And you point out in the book, which I had never considered before, that is an entirely arbitrary age. So tell us about the problems, even at 13, with having access to these platforms.
Yeah. So 13 was chosen as the age of so-called internet adulthood in 1998, before social media even existed, as a compromise with tech companies. It wasn't chosen in consultation with, any parents or authorities or anything, because really what parent or developmental expert or teacher would ever say, 13, middle school, right at the beginning of puberty, that's the perfect time to introduce social media. Like, no one would ever argue that middle school is hard enough already. And there's so much maturity that happens between 13 and 16. just a lot of development of self-control. The social system, among kids settles out some. They're not quite as sensitive to what other people think at 16 as they were at 13. So it doesn't make sense for it to be 13. Although, speaking of like small progress, I think it'd be amazing if the social media companies verified age even to make sure that kids were 13, because they don't even do
They're
that.
not. Yeah.
Right? There are 10-year-olds on TikTok on a regular basis, even on Instagram, because they don't verify age. And they say they do, oh, yeah, we see, sometimes we kick them off, but it's routine. And surveys show that, 10 to 12-year-olds are like, I think maybe not the majority, but a good 40, almost 50% are on TikTok. Clearly they're not doing enough. But I think, keeping them off of social media until 16 is challenging. That I do think can be done, more than, say, keeping them off YouTube on the school laptop. That's really hard. But with social media, if you give them a basic phone as opposed to a smartphone, if you put parental controls on their laptop, you're getting things like you're talking about, like the water sneaking through, but then you have the tools in place to block it. So my younger two are 13 and 15, almost 16. And so they have a couple of times managed to open accounts, but I've managed to shut them down and block access pretty successfully with those two strategies.
I will say one of the things that's good about TikTok is that it serves you your kids' accounts, even if they're secret. Don't ask me how I know. This leads me to a question about scaffolding and figuring out, like, I now have a 17-year-old as of yesterday, 15-year-old and a 13-year-old. And we've kind of taken the approach. I mean, do they have social media? Maybe some. And then, of course, like Amy was saying, I think of social media as Facebook and Instagram. They're on Snapchat. Like, I don't know
Yep.
what Snapchat is, but
It's the favorite app of drug dealers. That's what it is.
Okay, that's great. That's good to know.
Good to know. Great.
That's awesome.
Gotta recheck that one. But how do you start, I wonder, scaffolding kids to be able to use social media responsibly? One of the things I always tell my kids is everything you ever post on social media, I want you to picture me and your high school principal sitting down and opening your phone together, because the chance of that happening is very high. And
Yes,
so
exactly.
I also feel like it's important, having a 17-year-old now, to say, like, let's try to talk about how we're using these things. Are we engaging in bullying of other people? Are we watching inappropriate things? Are we realizing that watching depressing content, or maybe even content that might be informative about sexuality or different ways of expressing ourselves, that it's totally fine to be curious about those things. But
Absolutely.
if you are only getting served content about variations of people's sexual expression, you might not be ready for that information at 13, and you might start seeing the world as being 90% something when the world is 2% that thing.
Right. Right.
And
Exactly.
so how do we do groundwork and get them ready and be talking enough about social media, because it's not just like when you turn on your 16, you'll be totally fine.
Right. Absolutely. And I should also say here that some people argue you should put it off until 18, and I have a good amount of sympathy for that viewpoint.
Yeah.
Partially because when you open a social media account, you're assigning your data away, and what other contract can a 16 or 17-year-old
Child
sign?
sign.
Nothing.
But
You
this
have
is
to get a
another
parent
slippery
signature for,
slope.
yeah.
My kid is on, Sports U, which is fundamentally a social media app, but that's how they get all their information about their games that are
Yeah,
coming
and it
up.
shouldn't be that way. It should
Yeah.
not be that way. They should find another way to do that. That's another conversation.
But it looks just like a social media app. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, but to answer your question, so chat rule 1 has the 7 conversations you should have with your kids. Not even at 16 before they get social media, but even probably starting at 10. To have these conversations, like never, ever, ever send a nude picture is number 1.
That's a good one. And let me
right?
tell you, it's something I randomly shout at my kids like 10 times a week, and they're like, "Please stop saying that in public. We literally hate you." But I'm like,
Oh,
"Don't
that's so
ever send
funny.
pictures of your junk to anybody ever."
And right. And from my Generation X viewpoint, it's like, who would ever do that? And like
I
literally everybody
know.
does that if they're
I
under a
know.
certain age now, except your kid,
Yeah.
hopefully.
Right. Exactly.
Can you tell us a little bit about, because I'm sure people listening are like, this is great, like sounds good, but there's no way that's not actually practical to put into use. But you walk the walk. You have 3 kids.
Mm-hmm.
You are putting these restrictions in place with your own kids. Do they hate it? Have you gotten them to buy in over time? How have you done it? How has it gone?
Yeah. So, first, I have to say, I have not done it perfectly. I've made mistakes and had to course correct. And there certainly have been some things that my kids have hated more than others, but it can be done. So, for one thing, I just got to say this from the outset. It is a total myth that teens have to have social media to be able to communicate with their friends. It's just not true. There's other ways that they can do that. They can text, they can call. They just have to have the conversation with their friends of like, hey, my mom is really mean and she doesn't let me use Snapchat or whatever. And my 18-year-old had such a great thing to say about this. She said, anyone who won't communicate with you if you're not on a certain app is not actually your friend. And I thought that was really powerful.
True.
Yeah.
And I
And
think we talk a lot about boundary-seeking behavior. I think kids want boundaries around some
they
of this stuff.
do.
It's too big for
Even
them.
teens.
They
Yeah.
want permission to say, "I can't go to that keg party because my mom will kill me," because they're not
Yes.
ready to be there, but they
Yes.
also want, like, "My mom won't let me participate in sexy TikTok dances because 'cause I'm 12." They want it.
Exactly. Exactly. Then they have an out.
Yeah,
They have an out.
yeah.
So you said something in the book that has really stayed with me. To not give your kid a phone, which again, if you maybe this is for the parents out there who have a 9-year-old who's really
Yeah.
angling for that phone for their 10th
Yep.
birthday. You said in the book, if you don't give your kid a phone, that's one fight. It might be a big fight, but it's one fight. But if you do give your kid a phone, it is these small daily
Yep.
fights
Every single day.
every single day. Every single time you go to turn off the gaming console, I'm thinking about the gaming. You do a good job in the book of reframing, like it's kind of all a problem. It's not just the phone, it's
Yeah.
also the laptop and the gaming
Yeah.
console. When
Yeah.
my kids would be gaming, it was never a good time to turn it off because that's, of course, how the game is
Right. I
designed.
know. I know.
Right? No, it's a
I
level, it's
know.
a level, and
I
it
know.
would be this panic about turning it off
And
every
I'll say,
single
can
day.
you pause it? And they're like, no, we can't pause it. That's not how it works.
No.
I know. Mhm.
I'm gonna lose my knighthood and have
Yeah.
to be a serf again if I turn it off.
Yeah. And so it's a good point if you haven't waded into this yet. And this sounds really hard. Like it is hard, but so is giving them the phone because
Yeah.
it doesn't stop being hard.
Right.
Exactly.
One big fight versus 1,000 little fights.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, I think, and I think that that's it. That you put it off as long as possible, and then that you have clear, concrete rules for when they're going to get the smartphone. So not when you're ready, honey, but what I say in the book is you get your first smartphone, internet-enabled phone, when you get your driver's license. And it is a bright line.
Wow.
That's been really, really helpful.
That's
I have a
smart.
15-year-old about to turn 16. She's working on getting the license, but her DMV appointment isn't until November. And she's like, but I'm turning 16. Can you give it to me for my birthday? No, when you have your license.
That's when
And
you
that
get a
was that
phone.
was the one. And she hasn't asked again. So we had that one conversation, and then that was it because it was a very clear line.
Interesting part of this that I find in my own story is, but I have to say, I gave my kid a smartphone when they were like 9 because I have 3 closely spaced kids, and at the end of the school day, it was like the scattering of the cockroaches. I could never find them. I was literally like rolling up to the crossing guard being like, "Have you seen my kid?" And I really wanted the thing where I could see where they were because then they don't answer the phone. There's no service for
Mhm.
some reason in our downtown. I just was like, I want to go be able to find their dot. That seems so much easier to me. But I guess that's a place where we have to watch our own story, right? That like the convenience of me seeing their dot is maybe not worth having a 10-year-old with a smartphone.
You solve one problem and you create 100 others.
Mm.
Bummer.
That's
Yeah,
what
I totally
happens.
did that. Oops.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, when we
And
build
that's
a time
it's and that's
machine,
very
I'm
and
gonna
that's very
figure this
common.
out next
And
time.
that's very
Yes,
common.
that's a
Mhm.
that's a perfect way to say it though, right? That if you, because sometimes they really do I mean, that did solve a pretty big problem for me. I
Mhm.
like being able to look at the phone and say, "All right, I know where everybody is, and that's right. They got to their lesson that they were supposed to walk to. Great." But solved one problem, created 100. That is gonna stay with me.
We've been talking to Dr. Jean Twenge. Her new book is 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World. This book, no matter how old your kids are, no matter where you are on your getting your kids a phone and their social media journey, you will find so much useful takeaways and so much to think about. Dr. Twenge, tell our listeners where else they can find you.
So my website, jeantwangy.com, has all about my books and speaking engagements and op-eds and all of that good stuff. That's probably the best resource.
Spelled Twenge, and the first name is
Yes.
Jean, but we will link to that. So you're probably doing laundry or driving. Don't worry about writing it down right
We
now.
gotcha.
We will link to it.
It was such a pleasure to talk to you today, Jean. I've been following your research for years, and it's so important what you do. So thanks for talking to
Yeah,
us.
we're huge admirers of yours. Thanks for talking to us.
Thanks so much for having me on. It was really fun.